Good morning. So pop quiz. Fill in the blank. I'm going to say a sentence, and when I get to the end, I would like you to say out loud the last word. Now don't be bashful. Ready? Here goes. All the world's a... Very good. Let's try one more. It is the East, and Juliet is the... Almost excellent. Yes, Juliet is the sun. Of course, Shakespeare is not really saying that the world is a stage or that Juliet is the sun. He's using a metaphor to compare two dissimilar things, to transfer the qualities from one to the other. Etymologically, the Greek root of metaphor and the Latin root of transfer both mean to carry across. So the use of metaphor is a way to describe something by showing how it carries across properties from something else, something seemingly very different. For Romeo, Juliet is similar to the sun. How? We can think of several possibilities. Her presence brings light to his world, outshining all others. Or, like the sun, she is the center of his universe around which everything revolves. Or, he is inexorably drawn to her gravitational pull. Or, she sustains his life just as the sun sustains all life. That's the power of metaphor. It allows us to explore a relationship and find deep meaning based on our own experiences and understanding of the world. Journalist James Geary wrote a book on metaphor in which he describes it this way. When we lend a thing a name that belongs to something else, we lend it a complex pattern of relations and associations too. We mix and match what we know about the metaphor's source with what we know about its target. A metaphor juxtaposes two different things and then skews our point of view so unexpected similarities emerge. Metaphorical thinking half discovers and half invents the likenesses it describes. Now, metaphor is more than just a literary device used in poetry and prose. The Shakespearean examples are explicit metaphors where it clearly states that X is Y. But our everyday language is replete with implicit metaphors where the relationship is not spelled out so obviously. For example, statements like, "That delay cost me an hour," and "You need to budget your time," carry an implied relationship that time is money. Can you spot the implied metaphors in these two statements? I hold certain beliefs, and we share many beliefs. There's an implied metaphor that beliefs are possessions, possessions which can be held and shared. Or how about this pair? His record is spotless, and he doesn't want to get his hands dirty. These statements use the metaphor that compares morality to cleanliness. It has been estimated that we utter one metaphor for every 25 words we speak. Here's an example Geary offers from an Australian weather forecast. Australian. Perth is in the grip of a heat wave with temperatures set to soar to 40 degrees Celsius by the end of the week. Australia is no stranger to extreme weather. Melbourne was pummeled with hailstones the size of golf balls on Saturday. Long-term, droughts, brush fires, and floods have all plagued large swaths of Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria. Geary points out that there are 5 metaphors in these 58 words. A city is in the grip. Temperatures soar. A country is no stranger. Hailstones are the size of golf balls. An area is plagued. Now, I'm not sure the hailstone one is much of a metaphor because not much difference between hailstones and golf balls. They're very similar. But he missed a metaphor in the phrase heat wave, which compares temperature with water. Once you start looking for metaphors in our language, you see them everywhere. But why is this important? Because metaphors do more than simply make comparisons. They frame how we view the world. They focus our attention on some aspects of a concept and ignore others. They have profound influences on how we conceptualize and act with respect to the target of the metaphor. This was demonstrated in a 2011 Stanford study, which used two different metaphors for crime. When crime was described as a beast preying on a community, the participants in the study were more likely to support an increase in police forces and jailing of offenders as a means to combat crime. But when participants were told crime is a virus infecting a city, they were more inclined to treat the problem with social reforms. Sport is another area awash in metaphor. Many of us will go home today and watch football games or the Baseball World Series. The difference in the metaphors in these two sports was humorously illustrated by comedian and social critic George Carlin. Football is played in a stadium. Baseball is played in the park. In football, you wear a helmet. In baseball, you wear a cap. And in football, they have the clip, the hit, the block, the tackle, the blitz, the bomb, the offense, and the defense. In baseball, they have the sacrifice. Metaphor both reflects our culture and shapes it. An early proponent of the importance of metaphor in explaining complex cultural phenomena is cognitive linguist George Lakoff. In his 1980 book, Metaphors We Live By, he stated that the conceptual systems of cultures and religions are metaphorical in nature. In subsequent years, he applied his theories to politics. He argues that politicians must frame a political debate by using metaphors that present your values favorably. Today, I would like to explore some of the metaphors used within Unitarian Universalism and think about how we are framing our religion. To start with, one of our most prominent metaphors is found in the seventh principle, the interdependent web of all existence. On the surface, the strands of a spider's web are being used to represent how all existence is interconnected. But some have found deeper meaning in this metaphor. One minister reflects on other properties of a web, that its connections are not hierarchical, that the web has multiple anchor points, that it is resilient in the face of light breezes, and that it is reparative where connections may be broken and formed again in different ways. Meanwhile, other ministers extend the metaphor of interconnectedness beyond the environmental context of the seventh principle to represent how we are interconnected despite our differences, and even how our seventh principle may be our way of coming to fully embrace something greater than ourselves. The flaming chalice has also been used as a UU metaphor. A few months ago, I gave a testimonial where I used the chalice behind me as a metaphor for our congregation, where the base that supports us is the collection of programs and activities that form our foundation. The bowl that holds and shelters us are the buildings and grounds and all of the people who maintain this church. And the flame is our fire of commitment, as reflected in our justice work and the other work in the world. Now, a minister in Washington State sees the chalice as representing the light of individual freedom held aloft by a solid, caring community. The author of the book To Re-Enchant the World, A Philosophy of Unitarian Universalism, views the large basin of the chalice bowl as a metaphor for our inclusiveness and pluralism, while a minister in Massachusetts focuses on the chalice flame as a metaphor for lives of human beings, both as individuals and in community. Because a metaphor emphasizes specific qualities and relationships between the source and its target, more than one metaphor may be used to describe the same concept. For example, a few years ago, the UU Growth Lab, a Facebook group, asked its members to suggest metaphors to describe our congregations, metaphors that represent the central purpose and identity of our communities of faith. I'll share with you some of their responses and some others. Family. This is a common metaphor for a congregation because it emphasizes the relational aspect of being together in community, how we celebrate together in times of joy and help each other out when times are tough. Of course, family is a metaphor that would apply to many congregations, not just UUs, and it's not a particularly inclusive metaphor. Think how difficult it can be for a newcomer to be accepted as one of the family. A mosaic. Representing a congregation as a mosaic emphasizes that we are a community of different people, different ideas and backgrounds, which, when pieced together, creates an image that we cannot see in our separateness. It has also been suggested that the lead filling that holds the pieces of the mosaic together represents the covenant that holds us together in community. A hospital. Advice columnist Dear Abby once said that a church is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints. This was mentioned because many come to our churches to find healing for the wounds suffered in our lives and to find acceptance for our faults, because none of us are perfect. A safe harbor or haven. This is a common metaphor that portrays a congregation as a shelter and protection from a difficult world. Many UUs find the idea of a haven appealing, a place where they can be themselves and express their ideas without fears of rejection. But it's a rather insular metaphor that takes focus away from the congregation's role in society. A beacon. The metaphor of a beacon, on the other hand, conveys quite a different image of a congregation, one that is outward focused. As a matter of fact, earlier this year, the Unitarian Church in Summit, New Jersey, changed their name to Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Their minister of worship and outreach said, "Beacon, as a metaphor, illuminates the congregation's calling to be a light in dark times, to rekindle a love that leads to justice and liberation in our world. We tend to this flame of our faith, and as a beacon, open our sanctuary doors wide as a sacred site for refuge and renewal. Beacon is a call to serve, to speak up, and to pass on the dream." Laboratory. This is my metaphor. I suggested in a sermon last year. I propose that we view a congregation as a laboratory, a place where we could experiment with change, because our faith, unlike many others, is all about change and evolving, and we could learn how to become change agents in society and to help people cope with the changes in their lives. And base camp. A UU blogger suggested viewing a congregation as a base camp for life's expedition. The blogger said, "A congregation must be more than a refuge. It must be a place that prepares us for the true work of our lives, the mountains we must climb to become increasingly full and whole souls. These are mountains of self-discovery, of spirit and love and depth. And they are mountains of outer work, the work that we do to help make our world a place that is more accepting, more compassionate, and more just." In 2009, a poll was taken that asked Americans the following question. People often use metaphors to describe their life. Which one of the following do you think best describes your life? The choices were a battle, a carousel, a journey, a live performance like a play, a novel, a race, or the seasons. Think about that for a second. Which one appeals to you as a metaphor for life? Over half responded that life is a journey. Now, the metaphor of a spiritual journey or path is one that is used a lot in Unitarian Universalism. We often describe ourselves as a religion of seekers. So using a metaphor of a journey to describe our approach to spirituality seems appropriate. A minister in Akron describes it this way. In many discussions of what is often called faith development, the metaphor of the journey is used to describe our spiritual lives. Our spiritual lives, in this view, are individual journeys characterized by departures and arrivals and moving from one phase, one stage, one place to another. To be a spiritual being is to move, to leave, to journey, and perhaps to reach a final destination. It is hardly surprising that the metaphor of the journey has been and remains so important within Unitarian Universalism. Houston Smith, the well-known philosopher of religion, refines this journey metaphor as a path up a mountain. Each of us may be taking different paths up the mountain, he says, but all trails converge at the top. Others view a spiritual journey as walking a labyrinth. Despite the twists and turns, you can't get lost, like in a maze, because there is only one path that will take you safely to the center of the labyrinth and then back out again. And still others don't view a spiritual journey as following a path to a destination, but instead see it as a process of discernment and use the metaphor of following our inner compass that points to our true north. A very different idea of spirituality is the famous metaphor offered by Forrest Church, a prominent Unitarian Universalist minister, author, and theologian. He wrote, "In what I call the cathedral of the world, there are millions of windows, each telling its own story of who we are, where we came from, where we're going, each illuminating life's meaning. In this respect, we are many. But we are also one, for the one light shines through every window. No individual, however spiritually gifted, can see this light, truth or God, call it what you will, can see this light directly. We cannot look God in the eye any more than we can stare at the sun without going blind. This should counsel humility and mutual respect for those whose reflections on ultimate meaning differ from our own." And so we come full circle, from comparing Juliet with the sun to comparing that which you think of as ultimate with the sun. The importance of metaphor is that it allows us to discuss abstract concepts which may be beyond our full comprehension, by comparing them with other concepts which are more familiar to us. For a pluralistic faith like ours, this is indispensable. It provides a way to communicate with each other even though we may speak different theological languages. And it provides a way to explore deeper meanings and gain new understandings about our faith. I'll close with another selection from Reverend Lisa Ward's sermon that I read in the first reading. "We, as Unitarian Universalists, don't tell you how to believe, or even specifically what to believe. We draw out that divine spark within you so that you can give it life in the world. We do this by welcoming your journey and dwelling in the challenge of community with you. We may not use the word form God for what we do and why we do it. Some do, some don't. We may use other names, other symbols, other praises to bring about a sense of the living, loving divinity that dwells in us and amongst us. It is troubling to some who come through our doors that we do not use the word God necessarily. But what we do in worship and welcome is honor the universal essence and source of life that calls us to the greater good. We reach for, communicate, and praise this essence in its vibrant and humbling diversity. In order to get ourselves to that place of community where we can honor many names and countless journeys, yet trust greater unity in which all dwell, is through the welcome of metaphor. May it be so. Now I invite you to rise in body or spirit to sing hymn 1028, "The Fire